Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, just one thing before the formal meeting. Black History Month is held each October as an opportunity to recognise and celebrate black culture across the world. Throughout the month, Aberdeenshire Council's Equalities team will be sharing local and national information, including personal accounts. This information will be shared on social media and other council communication channels, so please keep an eye out for it. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the formal part. I've got one or two statements to make to colleagues. Please note that the meeting is being streamed live and the recording will be published online for public viewing after the meeting. Can all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking and activate their cameras and microphones where possible when invited to speak? Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. Sorry. If members wish to speak on any point, please notify me via the instant message function in the Skype meeting invite, or if you have dialed into the meeting via telephone, please state your name and request to speak. I will then bring you in at an appropriate time. Please do not use the instant message facility in the Skype meeting for any other messages, as these may appear in the live stream and recording of the meeting. If any members lose connection during the meeting, please take action to rejoin the meeting yourself, failing which alert the committee officer by a separate Skype instant message if possible. If you have any technical issues, support will be available from an IT officer during the meeting. Can I also confirm that members have been able to access the PowerPoint presentation for item 4, which has been published with the agenda papers on the council website? So first of all, I'm going to ask Anne if she would take the sediment via the roll call. Anne, please.
Thank you, Provost. I have apologies from Councillors Buse and Sutherland. Councillor Adam?
Sorry, Councillor Ingram left the room.
I'm back.
He's back. Sorry, Jim. Right, okay. Right, Anne, please. Sorry.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Adam?
Here.
Councillor Agnew?
Present.
Councillor Aitchison?
Present.
Councillor Allen?
Present.
Councillor Argyle?
I'm here.
Councillor Bailey?
Here.
Councillor Beagrie?
Present, thank you.
Councillor Berry?
Present.
Councillor Blackett?
Here.
Councillor Bruce?
Here.
Councillor Alan Buchan? Councillor Charles Buchan?
Here.
Councillor Marion Buchan?
Present.
Councillor Calder?
Present.
Councillor Carr?
Here.
Councillor Cassie?
Present.
Councillor Cox?
Present.
Councillor Davidson?
Present.
Councillor Dickinson?
Present.
Councillor Duncan?
Here.
Councillor Durno?
Here.
Councillor Everson?
Present.
Councillor Ewanson?
Present.
Councillor Fakeley?
Here.
Councillor Findlater?
I'm here.
Councillor Ford?
Yes.
Present.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Forsyth? Councillor Gibb?
Here.
Councillor Gifford?
I'm here.
Councillor Harper?
Present.
Councillor Hassan?
Present.
Councillor Hood?
Present.
Councillor Howitson?
Present.
Councillor Hutchison?
Here.
Councillor Ingleby?
Here.
Councillor Ingram?
Here.
Councillor Johnston? Councillor Kill?
Present.
Councillor Cloppert?
Present.
Councillor Latham?
Here.
Councillor Leslie?
Present, thank you.
Councillor Launchy?
Present.
Councillor Mayor?
Present.
Councillor McHale.
Here.
Councillor McKelvey.
Present.
Councillor Mollison.
Here.
Councillor Owen.
Present.
Councillor Partridge.
Present.
Councillor Petrie.
I'm here.
Councillor Pike.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present.
Councillor Robertson.
And good morning.
Morning. Councillor Ross.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Roy.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Hazel Smith.
Yeah.
Councillor Norman Smith.
Present.
Councillor Stephen Smith.
Here.
Councillor Stirling.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Topping.
Here.
Councillor Walker.
I'm here.
Councillor Wallace. Councillor White.
I'm here.
Councillor Wilson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Withy.
Here.
Provost, I'm just going to return to those who didn't respond.
Yes, of course.
Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Johnston. And Councillor Wallace. Okay, Provost, we have 63 members present at the moment.
Thank you very much. So, do members have any interest to declare? If so, please indicate now using instant message and I will bring you in. Okay. Members are requested to agree the equality statement. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you. 2B, members are requested to agree to take item 5 in private. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Very much.
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to the first substantial item, the Aberdeenshire Council Plan. I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to address this initially. And this report requests full Council to note and approve the Council Plan 2020-2022. Chief Executive, please.
Provost, thank you and good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
Reflecting and recognising the profound change that COVID-19 has brought to every aspect of our lives, in July early this year, full Council agreed to 6 new strategic priorities to better help us focus on what is important just now for communities across Aberdeenshire. Council directed that a new Council Plan be developed, setting out how the new priorities will be progressed and achieved. The Council Plan for 2020-2022, recommended to full Council today, builds on the strengths that Aberdeenshire Council and Aberdeenshire communities and businesses have demonstrated so effectively over recent months. Strong collaboration and joint working, celebrating the fact that we focus on local priorities, committed to do things differently according to local priority and need. An agility and pragmatism to change how we do things wherever and whenever needed, making the best of everyone's strengths and capabilities. And importantly, ensuring we support the most vulnerable in our communities, both young and old. Whilst there may continue to be uncertainty ahead of us, these sharper priorities will help ensure we are focused, resourceful and resilient. Work to develop the new medium-term financial strategy and service and area plans and performance management arrangements required to enable the achievement of the Council Plan will continue to be progressed. Councillors will see that paragraphs 4.4 and 4.5 set out an intended timescale for the presentation of service and area plans to the relevant committee and a commencement of performance reporting against new priorities. Clearly, as I've touched on, we are all continuing to live in a quite dynamic time just now with COVID-19. Since the report was written on 17th September, we have experienced further changes in national restrictions with consequential impacts on and demands for our services. To ensure that we fulfil our duty of care for the capacity and well-being of both officers and councillors and a continued need to prioritise and manage workload, it is proposed that Council agrees to some flexibility in the timetable to be followed. It is proposed that service and area plans, once ready, be brought forward to the relevant committee from December 2020 onwards, with the intention that all are presented by the end of February 2021. Performance reporting on a service-by-service basis will continue without interruption. Performance reporting against the new priorities will commence as soon as practicable once the service and area plans have been approved, with the intention that this is no later than April 2021. This will also help ensure that the learning, recommendations and action plans stemming from the best value assessment report, which full council has yet to receive and consider, will be fully reflected in service and area plans and our refreshed performance reporting arrangements. Audit Scotland have been consulted on a revised approach and timeline, are supporting what is proposed. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Are there any questions for the Chief Executive? No. I'll ask now the Leader of the Council, please.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, everybody. Can I start by thanking the Chief for his and for clarification on the dates referred to in paragraphs 4 and 5.
Can't hear.
Sorry, Provost, can you hear me?
It seems to be just bouncing. The words are just bouncing off the wall. Is that better, Jim?
Okay, let me.
Right.
It's usually just me who does that. Let me switch my video off. Is that any clearer, Provost?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Yeah, I'll start again, Provost, if that's okay. Can I start by thanking the Chief Executive for his introduction and for his clarification on the dates referred to in paragraphs 4.4 and 4.5 of the report. I think the suggested programme of completion of service plans in a flexible and phased approach like that from December into the new year reflects the reality of the amount of work that will be required to create and prepare these documents, along with the subsequent scrutiny arrangements that will follow, as he just said. Can I also add my thanks to the officers across the Council who have contributed to the process that brought this report to us today, and further add thanks to the many councillors across the Chamber who contributed to the discussions that have taken place over the last many weeks. Can I especially thank Anne Riddle, who very late in the day yesterday took many typed up notes and scribbles from me and amended some text in the council plan, which I hope all colleagues received yesterday afternoon. And my very final thanks, Provost, goes to the councillors in the partnership who suggested a few amendments to the council plan, many of which we accepted, as you can see in that reissued plan, and I'm grateful for their input to the process. As all members will know, it's 3 years since the last council plan was implemented in 2017. At that time, a 5-year plan was developed which focused on reshaping council services against a backdrop of an uncertain financial climate, recognising the organisation's ability to adapt to that challenging environment. No one would have or could have predicted that our environment would be so earth-shatteringly challenged in the interim by a global pandemic, an event so significant and life-altering as to force us to swiftly and radically rethink our priorities along with our entire way of living and working. But that, as we know, is precisely what has happened. And Aberdeenshire, in our response to the pandemic, has proven once again that through working with our partners, communities and employees, that we can have the expertise, knowledge, resilience and adaptability to focus resources where they are most needed and ensure that the most vulnerable in our society have access to the services that they rely on day in, day out. This is something of which we should all be very proud indeed, and is very much the hallmark of Aberdeenshire and the way that we do business. Our renewed council plan, which I'm formally moving today, will more sharply focus on those services that are most essential to our residents, our local economy and our environment, so that we can continue to prioritise service delivery and associated resources to the areas that are most in need. We have replaced, as everyone knows, the 11 previous priorities with 6 new, more focused strategic priorities that better reflect our current challenges and aspirations. These priorities will inform the medium-term financial strategy and carbon budget, helping us to focus resources where the need is greatest. It will set out how services will adapt to work within the budget available and what services can be reduced or stopped altogether. This council plan will steer our future decisions around every service delivery, but also on investment, and provide a steer to officers about where and how savings can and should be realised. This includes making the best use of digital technology to improve our business, whilst also ensuring that no one is left behind in our pursuit of more efficient working methods and service delivery. Where it is reasonable to do so, we'll work towards fully recovering the costs of delivering some of our council services, and we'll look at operating in a more commercial way wherever that is possible. And that means looking at every opportunity for shared services and insourcing with other councils and public sector bodies. It's about looking for sponsorship and advertising opportunities and looking at different ways of procuring and delivering our services. In doing all of that, we will ensure, we will ensure that we don't end up competing with the private sector, where they are already going through some really difficult and challenging times, as we know only too well. And we will do all of that in order to protect our frontline services. Our focus will be on the services we deliver and, where possible, reducing or removing the expensive overheads of buildings. And of great importance is our continuing focus on climate change, green renewal and a circular economy, which remains a crucial part of all of our decision-making processes. Recognising that we have a responsibility for contributing to all of the priorities, the chairs of each of the policy committees will now highlight how they intend to support the delivery through their own services. And I will begin, Provost, by highlighting the contribution of the Business Services Committee. This is a renewal plan for Aberdeenshire. The focus is on exploring how we could do things differently, working alongside our communities to ensure that we deliver high quality services. Business Services will focus on providing efficient and effective business support, advice and regulation, supporting the delivery of the Council's priorities through a programme of digital innovation and web-based services. Our focus is critical to the delivery of our priorities, so we can support sustainable and affordable workforce plans to support employee well-being. We will maximise income through reducing costs alongside commercialisation opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, and deliver a cost-effective estate that is fit for purpose both now and in the future. So thank you very much for that, Provost. I will formally move the recommendations on page 4 of the agenda, and I will now hand over to Councillor Peter Argyle, the Chair of the Infrastructure Services Committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gifford. I wonder, you've motion, have you a second there for the record, please?
I believe Councillor Peter will second after the policy chairs have spoken, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Argyle, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Provost. And may I say, first of all, I'm very, very pleased that Councillor Petrie, on behalf of the partnership, is willing to second this motion from the leader. I've said all along how important it is that we work together on these really important issues, and the contribution that the partnership have made and the input they've had into the plan, I think, is really important and very welcome from my point of view. Talking about infrastructure services, though, I don't think I need to say that we have a very wide-ranging remit which covers waste, recycling, landscape services, economic development, transportation and planning, all of which support a number of the Council priorities. The pandemic has highlighted the importance of local action, the importance of supporting people and communities and facilitating cohesion. Infrastructure services is pivotal in delivering Council priorities to secure a future that is greener, healthier and fairer. We need to protect our natural resources and facilitate the growth of the green economy by developing spatial and economic strategies that promote sustainable growth without contributing to the effects of climate change in Aberdeenshire. Our waste and recycling service will support our local environment and contribute to reducing emissions. Our roads and street lighting network will help keep people safe and also encourage active lifestyles and active travel opportunities. This weekend has yet again seen flood damage affecting large parts of Aberdeenshire. On that point, on your behalf, I would like to thank everybody who responded to the severe weather warning and who worked brilliantly over the weekend to avoid major incidents. Council staff for certain, but also SEPA and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and other agencies. We must ensure that our residents and businesses are equipped to adapt to the increasing risk of flooding. Fundamental to our economy pillar, is supporting local businesses through the pandemic and through Brexit. Linked to the rebuilding of our local economy is the provision of an affordable, reliable and well-connected passenger transport service. We will continue to work towards closing the gap between economic, environmental and social outcomes in Banff, Macduff Fraserburgh and Peterhead. Thank you very much, Provost. I'll now hand over to Councillor Gillian Owen, the Chair of the Education and Children's Services. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Gile. Thank you. Councillor Owen, please.
Coming under the pillar of our people, education is the very foundation of our aspirations for Aberdeenshire communities. The impact of lockdown and the restrictions placed on us are not fully understood, but there is evidence to suggest that the impact on our children and young people has been significantly impacted. So we must increase our efforts to provide whatever support is needed so they continue to be the very best they can be and go on to positive destinations. Our relenting focus will be on the continuous improvement on outcomes for our children and young people, and to ensure our working arrangements support this activity. We recognise the importance of this council plan in shaping how we deliver services in the future. And part of that is how we all contribute to the significant budget shortfall we are facing as a result of the pandemic. By aligning our medium-term financial strategy to this plan will ensure that we focus investment where it will have the greatest impact, whilst also providing a steer for where savings can and should be saved. Thank you very much, and I will now hand over to Councillor Anne Sterling, Chair of Communities Committee.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Owen, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Communities Committee, who have responsibility for housing, Live Life Aberdeenshire, and has a link back to the Integrated Joint Board for Health and Social Care. And our focus has partnership at its heart. We are committed to developing new partnerships and enhancing our existing ones, so we're able to collectively improve outcomes for the communities which we serve. In order to thrive, everyone needs somewhere to live where they feel safe and is affordable. We will continue to work towards providing good quality housing and support those people who are facing homelessness or need support to access appropriate accommodation. We will also work with our communities so they are resilient, they feel empowered and enabled to take decisions for themselves. And that's particularly important to embed in our work actions which reflect the necessity to tackle poverty and inequalities across Aberdeenshire. And we will do everything we can to ensure people are encouraged and supported to live healthy and active lifestyles. I'm aware that services are already developing the plans which will support the delivery of these priorities in more detail, which they will set out clear action plans so we as elected members can measure how we are performing against our priorities, where we need greater assurance of progress being made, and how overall we're making positive impacts on our communities. I look forward to seeing these plans develop and come forward for approval by committee, and for the performance framework to be established so we can collectively and collaboratively get on with the important business of delivering on our priorities. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Sterling. Thank you very much. Are there any questions at this point for policy chairs? No? Okay, thank you. Councillor Petrie, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'll just start the camera, which isn't working. Right, I'm going to go without the camera until
Provost, I will have an amendment.
Sorry, Provost, we seem to have lost audio with Councillor Petrie. We're just trying to sort that out just now.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Sorry, Provost, Councillor Ford, I'll just to let you know.
Yes, I heard you. Yes, I've got you on the list.
Thank you.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes, quite clear. Thank you.
Internet has cut out there, and I think it might be the camera, so if you're happy for me to go without that.
Yes, by all means, yes.
Perfect. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will Start again. Thank you, Provost. We live and work in ever-changing times, and that has led us to the requirement for a new council plan to get us through to 2022 in increasingly difficult circumstances. This has to be done against a backdrop where we must deal with COVID and a number of other uncertainties. And we can't fix those things alone, but we can work together to make the road ahead as smooth as possible for Aberdeenshire. Firstly, our thanks to the officers for their work on the plan and priorities, and thanks also to the administration for taking the time to consider and work with us to incorporate our changes to the original plan. Whilst we appreciate that the Council must ensure that it works in a financially viable way, we must also not lose sight that we do what we do for the benefit of those we represent. We deliver services for the people of Aberdeenshire, and they must remain at the forefront of our considerations throughout. What the Council does cannot be done alone. Partnership working is key, and that is with other organisations, but with our communities too. As we will undoubtedly ask more of our residents in the coming months and decide what services are essential to them, we must engage and listen to them throughout. They know their areas of Aberdeenshire best. And with this in mind, I'm delighted that a commitment to participatory budgeting and asset transfers are now reflected in the plan. We are all very aware of the lasting impact that COVID will have on the mental health of many. And I'm therefore also pleased to have our commitment to the protection and support of good mental health expressly mentioned. This follows on from agreement at the Community Planning Partnership yesterday for an additional LOIP covering health and wellbeing. We know it's a growing problem, and these steps show that Aberdeenshire Council are aware and preparing ways to help those who need it. Tackling poverty and inequalities is one of the underpinning principles of our new priorities. Looking ahead, unfortunately, the number of people who face poverty will only increase. We must ensure that the support they require is available easily and without stigma. It will impact on people throughout the area, and it will impact on almost every service area of the Council. It is essential that in everything we do, we work to improve things for those facing difficulties. Over the last 7 months, we have had to become accustomed to an increasingly digital world. For us as a Council, this has worked remarkably well, and has also pushed forward some much needed forward thinking for digital ways of working in education. We must remember, however, that this new digital world is not for everyone. Some people can't work this way, and some people won't, and the understanding and acceptance of this is crucial. The focus on commercialisation is accepted by our partnership as essential in these times. However, that comes with a caveat that consideration of services for our communities must. Following on from the remarks of the Chief Executive about timescales, I'm content for the slight delay in receiving the service and area plans until February, given the current pressures on staff and officers that have been recognised. We gave a commitment earlier this year to work cross-party where we could, because the last thing that the people of Aberdeenshire want is to see any political point scoring. And the point we have reached today shows that this can be achieved to do what is necessary for the communities we serve. I am happy to formally second the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Petrie. Thank you very much. Councillor Pike, please.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, everyone. I read this plan, very interested, and I'd like to say Aberdeenshire Council as a public organisation has made great progress in adopting and developing digital working. But I'm concerned that, as Councillor Gifford has clearly demonstrated this morning, there is still much to be done in reaching out across Aberdeenshire to get great digital capability. The Chief Executive this week has written to the Chancellor of the Exchequer advising that only 50,000 households don't have broadband capability, but perhaps it would be useful if that was qualified by saying that only 40% of our households have actual access to digital fibre broadband. In the Council plan, we talk about focus on digital technologies, and this is an ongoing course of action, but I'd really like to see in this plan much more emphasis on getting the rollout of digital broadband, and that this is a priority for this council, because that is how we're going to reach out to people in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pike. Thank you. Councillor Everson, please.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you. And first of all, I welcome the comments made by Councillor Gifford that in any consideration of commercialisation, the delivery of public services remain key. I'm happy to support the amendments in the council plan introduced by Councillor Gifford and seconded by Councillor Petrie for two reasons. Firstly, together they put people firmly in the plan and respond more specifically to the challenges that have to be faced as a result of COVID. The pandemic has shaken us up. It has highlighted the fundamental importance of health and well-being as an enabler for everything else. And I too welcome the comments in the Community Planning Partnership yesterday. We must respond with a greater awareness of our role in supporting and nurturing positive mental health across our communities. The pandemic has filled the lives of many children and young people with uncertainty, socially, economically, and in terms of their aspirations. We need to be sure to listen to their voice in a way which we have intended to do before, but were not quite achieved. We must respond by securing the best outcomes we can for all our children and young people. And the pandemic has brought more people into poverty, people who never expected to feel as vulnerable as they are now. Our plan must ensure that we can use our ever more scarce resources where they can give appropriate and sustaining support to those in greatest need. And secondly, together the amendments we put in our plan put our communities at the core, putting greater emphasis on partnership and shared aspirations to achieve agreed outcomes. They make it clear that we are ready to explore new ways of working to deliver on local priorities to support community confidence. But we cannot ourselves create resilient communities, but we can create the environment in which that resilience can grow and provide the frameworks through which our communities can become more empowered. The reference to community wealth building and the potential that that has to support not only economic but also social opportunities was welcome in the original plan, and the amendments strengthen that direction of travel. Finally, our priorities as a council, our underlying principles as a council, and our plan should enable us to bring the local transformation that is now needed. Going back, staying the same, neither are possible. The slight crucial amendments here today set the appropriate strategic direction to transform. And I too thank Councillor Gifford and the administration for the cooperative approach which has enabled us to reach a shared position today. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Petrie, I think you're still on the list, but you've spoken already. Did you want to come back in?
Yeah, no, sorry, that was just to indicate that I was back in the meeting.
That's fine, no problem. Councillor Ford. Councillor Ford.
Hello, Provost.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Provost, as indicated, I have an amendment.
Yes.
Colleagues, I'll start by a statement that we've often heard in this chamber. I wouldn't start from here. The problem that we have today is the Council's decision in July to vote down a proposal not to panic and commit itself instead to a rushed and nonsensical plan. And that is what we now have before us. Now, can I be the first to say that I realise it is not easy to write a council plan. The council is a very large and diverse organisation delivering a huge number of services in different ways, in different areas, and distilling all that down to a logical, coherent and useful document is a difficult thing to do. But in this case, essentially, once the council had made its decision back in July to organise its plan around having 3 pillars and 6 priorities, but with those 6 priorities in no way corresponding to the 3 pillars to which they were allocated, a sensible plan was no longer possible. And I would just point out, for example, that our pillar of our environment has under it infrastructure, which could be anything, and resilient communities, which surely would be under our people. The economy pillar has under it, well, the economy, effectively just repeating the same title. This is not a useful or sensible way of structuring the plan. So can I absolve officers who were given the thankless task of drafting this document, because by the time the council had taken its decision in July, something that made rational sense and was properly organised and understandable was no longer possible. If I think back to 2017, when we approved the previous plan, which was agreed unanimously with some amendment, I remember at the time criticising it perhaps for being a little bland and motherhood and apple pie. Can I take it all back? I now realise, having read this new one, that the 2017 plan was a work of genius. let's look at this new plan, and I'll start at the beginning, logically enough. In the foreword, we read from Councillor Gifford that the new plan will replace the previous 11 priorities with 6 new, more focused priorities. Now that sounds pretty promising. I'm on the Education Committee, so what does a more focused education priority look like? Well, in 2017, we had raising levels of attainment and achievement, so that was our end, and we had working with parents and carers to support children, so that was our means. That was the approach in part of achieving that end, and those I thought were pretty specific, logical, and things that we needed to address, and they were good priorities. So what is the more focused education priority in the new plan? Well, it's education. Now, what does that actually tell us? Education is a priority for the council. That tells us nothing at all. Of course education is a priority for the council. We're an education authority. We have around 170 schools. We spend half our budget on education. How can education not be a priority for the council? So anyone reading this document already knew that education was a priority for a council, for this council. And that information, well, it's not information. There is no additional knowledge or useful information imparted by that. Under our environment, we have infrastructure. Just one word as a priority. So, well, what's our priority for infrastructure? Do we want more of it, less of it, different, bigger? I mean, these are so bland as to tell us absolutely nothing at all. If I carry on through the elements of the plan, we have a commitment here to on page 16, focus on services, not buildings. Oh, that sounds great. Oh, hang on here though. On the previous page, we were told that one of our 6 strategic priorities was estate modernisation. That would be buildings then. I mean, this is absolute nonsense, colleagues. This is so badly put together, so illogical. It really tells us absolutely nothing at all. There is a confusion of ends and means. So in the 6 priorities, 5 of them are effectively ends, things the council wants to achieve, insofar as I can understand what they mean at all. But estate modernisation is definitely a means. It's a means to an end. Further down that same page, we have underpinning the priorities are a number of key principles, such as right places, right time, responsible finances. Yeah, that's right. Responsible finances is not an end for the council. It's a means to an end. It's how we deliver good public services. But the council's buildings are in exactly the same category as responsible finances. They're a means to an end. So if I can ask Anne Riddle, please, to put up our amendment. I'll do this with some regret, but at the end of the day, the decision taken in July left us with a plan that could not be made sensible, in our view, and we can't revisit the decision in July because it's within 6 months and it would require a lifting of standing orders. So we are left with a plan structured around a nonsense combination of words. I'm on the phone, so I can't see. Is the amendment now displayed, please?
Yes, I believe so, Councillor Ford.
Thank you. So we are not prepared to approve the new council plan because fundamentally it's structured around a nonsensical combination of 3 pillars and 6 priorities that simply don't correspond to the pillars. The priorities as non-specific as education and infrastructure provide absolutely no useful information or guidance for activity. You could justify doing or not doing virtually anything with priorities as bland as that. Ends and means are confounded through the plan, and at the end of the day, the plan is vague, contradictory, and inconsistent. It just does not make sense. Can I say the council will continue to do good things? The council provides a lot of importance of public services. Many of them have been mentioned this morning. I fully support those. That's why I'm on the council. I think it's really important the council does that and does it as well as possible. And it will continue to do that, and that's great. But that's not the question before us today. What we're being asked to do today is to approve a vague, contradictory, and inconsistent plan. And frankly, nobody with any intellectual self-respect should agree to do that, and I very much recommend the council doesn't. And we are offering an amendment so you don't have to, but this is not knocking the council's important public services. Those are important and they will continue, the point I'm making here is that they will continue just as well whether this plan is approved or not, because it adds nothing useful to the council's activities. So there's my amendment, Provost. Moved with some regret, but left with the position from July that there is no way that we can amend this plan to make it sensible.
I think it's indicated that Councillor Wilson wishes to second that. Is that correct?
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, the document is clearly well-meaning, and I in no way want to downplay that, but ultimately it's too arbitrary to gain our support. It states a number of priorities which are clearly important, but painfully vague and bear no correlation to anything we seek to be doing as a council. There are 6 priorities lying within 3 pillars under which they largely don't fit. Now, there is nothing in there that is objectionable, and it has all the right words, but not necessarily in the correct order. So it doesn't really make sense. 3 years ago, we had a council plan which I admit was written prior to the pandemic, but it had a set of 11 priorities which were illuminative in showing our vision and demonstrated where we wanted to direct our focus as a council. This plan instead offers a number of opaque words which don't really tell us anything. Of course, education, the economy and communities are our priorities. If they weren't, we would be a very odd kind of council, but they don't tell us very much beyond that. So I agree, it is with some regret that I second the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you. I see, Councillor Cassie, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Provost. Yeah, I'm supportive of the motion put forward by the council leader and supported by Councillor Petrie. It shows a cooperative approach that has been adopted here. The officers have worked tremendously well through this pandemic, and we need to maintain that journey. I do have some caveats that have been raised, and that's in relation to the commercialisation aspect within this. There's an awful lot of work that will need to be carried out there, in particular the non-creation of a two-tiered approach to some services, i.e. a better service will be delivered to those that can pay more. There's no mention of the risk appetite as such, but so obviously there's a fair bit of work to develop the strategy in relation to the commercialisation. So I'm supportive of the plan and the direction of travel that's taken, and the time that is required, bearing in mind everything else that is going on. So I'll be supporting the motion going forward with the caveats that have been pointed out.
Thank you, Councillor Cassie. I have no further indications, so I'm going to ask Councillor Ford if he would like to, in 3 minutes, sum up, please. And then I'll ask the Leader of the Council to do the same.
Thank you, Provost. It won't take 3 minutes because there's not been much said since I spoke. Colleagues, we are fully supportive of the Council delivering excellent public services, and I think colleagues know that perfectly well. And we will always try to help and contribute to that. That's why we're members of the Council like everybody else. I don't denigrate that for a moment. Colleagues, also, a plan is a difficult thing to produce, but this is not a well-written, well-structured, well-thought-out, logical plan, and we can do better than this, and we should do better. We can't amend this plan. We can't put forward an amendment for redrafting or whatever, because the plan is structured around 3 pillars and 6 priorities that don't fit in 3 pillars, and those priorities are a mixture of ends and means, and then there are commitments to other means that are not priorities but just as important. It is simply intellectually not coherent and not sensible, and it doesn't tell anybody anything. Having priority for the Council that is education, when it's an education authority and spends half its budget on education, conveys absolutely nothing meaningful. Every council has education as a priority. So, colleagues, this plan has let us down, and we're not prepared to vote for it because we don't want to let ourselves down. I say that with some regret. We will, of course, continue to engage constructively with delivering good things for the Council. I don't suppose this plan will do any harm. It could, however, just disappear without having any effect whatsoever on what the Council does. And on that basis, let's not bother to have it. We're not voting for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Johnston, I see you had raised to speak, but I'd already actually moved on to sum up, so I can't take you in at this point. So, Leader of the Council, please.
Thank you very much, Provost, and I'll leave my video off if that's okay, just in case we have any other problems. Can I thank most colleagues for their positive comments today and for inputting literally up to the last minute in the process that got us here. As we all know, this is the latest of the series of council meetings started when we agreed to our strategic priorities a number of months ago. We closed down the last financial year at the last council meeting, and that was effectively the end of the old priorities. And now we have a new plan that will lead into the process of producing the many service plans and area plans that will deliver on these priorities. And I think that is the critical part that now stands in front of us. I look forward to all councillors, and in fact, communities across Aberdeenshire getting involved in that process, and that will start for councillors anyway with the policy committee workshops that will start straight after the October recess, once we can get those into the busy diaries. What I don't look forward to, though, Provost, are councillors who are not getting involved and will not get involved in these discussions and then come in at the last minute to complain about the outcome. It's not helpful. Is this plan perfect? Well, it's probably not. Will the service plans and area plans be perfect? Well, probably not again, but they will be absolutely as good as we can possibly make them, and as good as we can afford, given our ever challenging budget situation. They will be all, first and foremost though, there to deliver on what our communities and our residents need. And I look forward to working with all of you, all of our communities and every resident in Aberdeenshire as we create service plans that will deliver for Aberdeenshire across the next coming months and years. There's still a lot to be done, and as Councillor Pike said, we need help from both governments in order to do some of that at any sort of pace. As we've discussed many times before, our response to the pandemic has been in many ways exacerbated by the lack of digital infrastructure, and that needs to be fixed very quickly. I take Councillor Cassie's point about commercialisation. It's a tricky balance to get right between squeezing the pips as much as you can, while at the same time supporting the local economy, and I look forward to taking those discussions through the workshops that will discuss these things in some detail. And I think the phased approach that the Chief Executive outlined at the start to bringing these plans forward, as I said earlier in my presentation, I think that I welcome that, and I think it's welcome and reflects the reality of how this work will emerge. We're going to be doing this at different paces and different rates through different policy committees, so I think it's right and proper that as those plans are ready, they will emerge, and I hope that will start from December onwards, as the Chief Executive said. So I look forward to working with all of you as we take us all through that next part of the process. I hope that all colleagues will support the recommendations in this plan and move on to the important work that now comes next. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Gifford. So we'll move to the vote, please.
Thank you, Provost.
Yes.
The motion then is with Councillor Gifford, seconded by Councillor Petrie, that Council agree the recommendations together with the amendment circulated. The amendment is with Councillor Ford, seconded by Councillor Wilson, not to approve the plan for the reasons stated. If members can please vote motion or amendment. Councillor Adam?
Motion.
Councillor Agnew?
Motion.
Councillor Aitchison?
Motion.
Councillor Allen?
Motion.
Councillor Argyle?
Motion.
Councillor Bailey?
Motion.
Councillor Beagrie?
Motion.
Councillor Berry?
Motion.
Councillor Blackett?
Motion.
Councillor Bruce?
Motion.
Councillor Alan Buchan? Councillor Charles Buchan?
Motion.
Councillor Marion Buchan?
Motion.
Councillor Calder?
Motion.
Councillor Carr?
Motion.
Councillor Cassie?
Motion.
Councillor Cox?
Motion.
Councillor Davidson?
Motion.
Councillor Dickinson?
Motion.
Councillor Duncan?
Motion.
Councillor Dunno?
Motion.
Councillor Everson?
Motion.
Councillor Ewanson?
Motion.
Councillor Fakeley?
Motion.
Councillor Findlater?
Motion.
Councillor Ford?
Amendment.
Councillor Forsyth?
Motion.
Councillor Gibb?
Motion.
Councillor Gifford?
Motion.
Councillor Harper.
Motion.
Councillor Hassan.
Motion.
Councillor Hood.
Motion.
Councillor Howitson.
Motion.
Councillor Hutchison.
Motion.
Councillor Ingleby.
Motion.
Councillor Ingram.
Motion.
Councillor Johnston.
Amendment.
Councillor Kill.
Motion.
Councillor Cloppert.
Motion.
Councillor Latham.
Motion.
Councillor Leslie.
Motion.
Councillor Launchy.
Motion.
Councillor Mayor.
Motion.
Councillor McHale.
Motion.
Councillor McKelvey.
Motion.
Councillor Mollison.
Motion.
Councillor Owen.
Motion.
Councillor Partridge. Councillor Petrie.
Motion.
Councillor Pike.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Reynolds.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Ross.
Motion.
Councillor Roy.
Motion.
Councillor Simpson.
Motion.
Councillor Hazel-Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Norman Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Stephen Smith.
Motion.
Councillor Stirling.
Motion.
Councillor Taylor.
Motion.
Councillor Topping.
Motion.
Councillor Walker.
Motion.
Councillor Wallace. Councillor White.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
And Councillor Withy.
Motion.
Provost, I'm just going to return to those who haven't responded.
Thank you.
Councillor Alan Buchan. Councillor Partridge. Councillor Wallace. I have 61 votes for the motion and 3 for the amendment. The recommendations in the report with the amendment circulated are approved, Provost.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Could we then agree the recommendation on page 4, item 3, note and approve the council plan and associated priorities and agree to receive annual performance reports evidencing progress with delivery of the council plan. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, which is the community impact assessment. This report details the community impact assessment process undertaken by the council and the reasons for the assessment. I'm going to ask the Director of Business Services to introduce it, and then the area manager for Martin will present a short presentation on the work done. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Provost.
Yes.
And morning, members. In terms of the Community Impact Assessment report, I'll say some words of introduction as the Provost has outlined before passing over to Elaine, who will take you through some of the headlines in terms of the work done and the findings to date. The report before you, I think, is a really useful, interesting, helpful report in terms of helping understand how our communities have been impacted by COVID in particular, and also helping inform, if you like, our understanding of that at a very local level and across Aberdeenshire in terms of how that might influence some of our thinking and understanding about how we take matters forward from here on. The process itself was very detailed, sought to be as inclusive as possible. I'll come back to that in a second. And indeed, I think the findings do give us that richness of feedback that's hugely important. In terms of the community impact assessment process itself, it is something that is regularly part of a response to a critical incident in this sense. This isn't a typical one, Chief Whiz, as all of us can recognise. It's not a one-off. We've again, just in the last number of days, had flooding again affecting parts of our communities. But this has been a much more long-standing impact in terms of this being a critical incident for the council and other communities to have to deal with, and it is a means to capture some of that feedback in a structured way that allows us to reflect on that and take that then forward. I'm aware that many members will have been involved in some local discussions around the community impact assessments, and again that's really important in terms of your roles and understanding of how that might impact on parts of your communities. And also we recognise that as we sought to get the views of communities across Aberdeenshire, that we recognise that in itself may not be 100% inclusive, and we are in the recommendations you'll see very keen that as we take this forward that we make sure we continue to build on that and make sure we get those harder to reach groups absolutely included within the future work. In terms of where this would then go, clearly we would want this to be impacting on our next steps, consideration in terms of our next step, making plans in terms of how we respond to this, and in terms of service delivery. That will be important in terms of how we take this forward. So I'll pause there, Provost, and just acknowledge the work from Elaine and team around this. Has been a huge amount of work. It's still ongoing, which we want to follow through, and Elaine can help us take through some of the next phases of the detail there. Provost, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Yes, could Elaine, could you take forward now, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Chair, thank you very much. I'll
Thank you.
share my screen.
Thank you. Hello?
Hello, yes, I'm sorry, I'm just
That's all right, sorry.
getting my screen up. There we go. That should be it now. Are you able to see that screen?
It's loading, Elaine, so hopefully just in a sec.
You can see it now.
So it's Community Impact Assessment Interim Findings. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, as the Director has outlined, we've undertaken the Community Impact Assessment as far as possible to engage with as many as possible across the whole of Aberdeenshire, accepting the limitations that were placed upon us because of the restrictions in place at the time. I'll go through to this. It's a short presentation and it's just to pick out some of the highlights from the report that's before you. It's a very fulsome report, and that report will be broken down into area and ward level where possible in the coming days and weeks. This was just to give you some of the highlights as we see them to date, and you'll see them peppered through the report if you've had time to have a look at that. So as the Director said, we did split the assessment into three parts to try and get as broad a view as possible. One, the community survey, which was an online survey which had its limitations. Part two was the ward forum discussions with community groups who had been delivering within our communities. So that's resilience groups, community councils, food banks and others who were already in existence, and others who stepped forward to help assist the communities they operated in. And the third part was looking at the data. So in summary, it was, what did the public tell us? What did the groups tell us who are actually delivering, and what does the data tell us as much as we can? Now, the other thing to bear in mind is this was a snapshot during the month of August, and I know some discussion with some members has highlighted that some of the responses will depend on the restrictions in place at the time. But this was from the month of August, which gives us a good indication of how people were feeling at that time. So this slide here, the first one is around the community survey and indicates the responses that we had. And interestingly, we can see that by a large margin, females responded overwhelmingly more than males, and that's something we would need to look at again in the future. Should we be running this again? But this broadly gives us an indication of who responded across Aberdeenshire, and so you're aware, across Aberdeenshire there was a broadly the same numbers or percentage numbers of people responding from each of the 6 areas. So we've got a good coverage across all 6 areas. turning to some of the information that we collected in the survey, the impacts that people were concerned about was about seeing people, that personal contact, the support that people were getting or not getting to support themselves and their mental health came out loud and clear. And concerningly, we did have responses saying people were drinking more during those early days of the pandemic, but in a positive note, people were taking more exercise and getting out and about more, so they were more active, which was really helpful. Some of the other interesting insights that we received was around the use of technology. Elsewhere in the data that we collected, people were saying some had difficulties in engaging through social media and through the internet because of connectivity, understanding and the likes. But broadly speaking, people were saying they had success in using technology to keep in touch with family and friends when they couldn't see them face to face, which was really helpful. So for the future, we may need to build on that and look at where our gaps are. But overwhelmingly, people kept coming back to the support and the support given by family, but also by neighbours and that wider community. So some of the positives and negatives, we split it into various headings. So this is still the community survey, and just we had over 4,000 responses, which is an overwhelmingly good response rate for a survey of this kind. So we've got good data. On the positive side, people were saying again, keeping in touch with folks, whether that's their neighbours or their family, but again that concern about mental health and the long-term impacts on people. We asked them about the place that they live in and the impacts on place, and helpfully people were indicating that they felt that their place was good, that they were able to get out and about, they were able to use paths and networks, they were able to get the fresh air which helped them with their mental health, and they were able to volunteer in their community. On the negative side, and this is somewhere we may need to take some more insight into, people felt less safe in their home or local area. We don't think that's to do with crime or criminal type activity. It is about feeling safe in the community because of the pandemic, but as I say, that's an area we would like to investigate some more. Not surprisingly, people did give views on the economy, and by and large people were very impressed with our local services, local shops, the local industries and their ability to be agile and respond to the pandemic, changing the way they deliver their business and their business model to help support communities particularly in need, which people were again and again saying was extremely positive, though there was some concern about people's long-term concerns about jobs, furlough, and their ability to act. Turning to the ward forums, which I know a significant number of you took part in. We had them across the whole of Aberdeenshire, so all 6 administrative areas. We had 130 groups were represented across Aberdeenshire, and as I said before, these were groups that were either stepped up to help address some of the issues that communities were facing, or those that were already in existence ahead of the pandemic. And some of those groups you will all have recognised came out of previous incidents. So the Storm Frank incident in the main, groups became mobilised and agile at that point, and they were able to mobilise quickly to assist us with this incident. So the feedback from the ward forums, there are no surprises, really. The people did value the assistance hub, absolutely, in terms of getting information. Of note, Aberdeenshire Council was praised in terms of its ability to react to support either businesses or community groups with funding at speed. That was recognised and came through loud and clear. Some of the negatives, as I said before, reliance on digital communication and sometimes too much information coming from too many sources. So we do need to look at that for the future. And some concerns about when volunteers go back to work and the ability of the groups that step forward to continue to operate. And we're working currently with AVA, Aberdeenshire Voluntary Action, to ensure that we support those volunteer groups in order to sustain their activity as it looks as if we are going to continue our work for the foreseeable. Turning to place, we asked the groups in the ward sessions again how they felt about the place that they lived in, what were the improvements, if there were any, and there was an overwhelming support around the lack of grass cutting and biodiversity and the improvements to the environment from early days, the lack of cars and the ability to cycle and walk safely. But equally on the negative side, we did get feedback again about the lack of grass cutting. So it was 50-50, but people did recognise the benefits, but also recognise the drawbacks. And that's something the service will have to consider. Turning to the economy, how did the community groups feel about the changes that were in place for them and what they saw? They again spoke about the ability of the local economy to react and diversify, that change in business model, and the ability of the local shops and infrastructure to support or to take support from community groups in order for them to deliver their services, and that close working that emerged between businesses and volunteers came through. One of the concerns that was raised by community groups was those charitable organisations, village halls and others who maybe fell through cracks of funding and the ability of them to be able to sustain themselves for the future. And that's something I know officers and others have been looking at, identifying other sources of funding to try and support our community halls and community charitable organisations. Turning to the data analysis, you'll see in your report there's a fairly chunky element around what the analysts have produced. So they were looking at the that same period and what has happened to the data, and the slide that you can see there highlights, and that's on page I think it's page 53 of the report. It shows the map. I have highlighted this as a really interesting piece of work by the analysts who have taken the intermediate data zones on 5 broad factors of vulnerability, which have a number of indicators. So it's a basket of baskets of indicators, which shows across Aberdeenshire the more vulnerable areas based on the COVID age, health, economic and other socio-economic vulnerability. And perhaps there's no surprises there that there are more vulnerable areas in the north based on this basket, but it does show that there are pockets of vulnerability across Aberdeenshire that we would need to address, not just in the north, but by overwhelmingly the areas shaded in orange, as you can see, are the more vulnerable areas, and moving down to green are the less vulnerable areas. That's not to say that hidden inside some of those green areas are not pockets of vulnerability, but it gives a good insight into what the data is telling us about vulnerabilities and where we may need to focus some attention for the future. And all of this information we are able to broadly break down to area and in some cases to ward level, and that's a piece of work that we're looking at the moment to help shape discussions with our communities and with our community groups and others looking to the future. So this is the last slide, you'll be glad to know. The emerging trends that we've picked out as you see them, they're jobs and education, our relationship with alcohol, mental health and loneliness, the ability of our community groups to step forward, but concerns about sustainability and the long-term support, the ability of our communities to be supported by their neighbours, that community activity, fantastic. People saying they would continue to shop local, and can we help them with that? Support local businesses. The positive responses about volunteering and the ability to step forward and volunteer in their area, and how do we capture that and sustain that for the long term? People being more physically active and getting out into our beautiful countryside, our paths, our networks, our places that are to help sustain them and their mental health. And generally people are positive about their local area and the community that they live in. These are our emerging trends at the moment, but as I say, these are from August, and as restrictions change, we may want to revisit this again, and as outlined in the recommendations, we may want to go back and revisit some of this, either the ward meetings or the survey again. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you very much indeed. It's a hugely important piece of work that's been done. So thanks very much for coming along to give us a talk about it just now. Is there any questions for the speaker at this point in time? I have a list of people who want to comment, but I'm just checking if there are any questions at this point. No? Okay. Well, I have 9 people wishing to speak. Councillor Johnson, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation to all concerned, Elaine in particular, on the social impact assessment. I thought that the whole process that we've gone through has been I would admit it's very time sensitive, but I think that what you captured at that particular point in August was absolutely spot on. And I think that it has demonstrated that it is possible to carry out those types of assessments. And I do thank those people that did the data analysis, because what they did bring out were the things that gave us a great deal of comfort that we were kind of on the track and doing the right kind of things. I also think that we have generally got it right in the processes that we've done here. I particularly like the fact that there is officers have identified that we need to build upon this, and I do think that we do need to kind of repeat some of this to test whether we got it right in the first place. We should always do that. It's a good scientific method, I suppose, statistically, and it would be good to get that snapshot as things progress. So I'm very pleased that this should go the way it is going, and the recommendations that are coming there are definitely ones which I would support. But just finally, just to say, I think it is, once we get this type of information, it is incumbent upon the politicians to react to that with the public in the right kind of way. And but I think that this kind of document and the process is exceptionally helpful. But thank you very much for all of this.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Gifford, please.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Provost. And can I start by thanking Mr Johnson for his introduction to this report, and to Mrs Brown, not only for our really good presentation, that's the second time we've seen that, those of us who were on the RRG were taken through that before, but also for the huge amount of work that's been done by her and her team over the last few months in conducting these impact assessments and then compiling this really interesting and very, very detailed report. If I could maybe just go off base slightly at start, Provost. Some of the things that were mentioned by Elaine as she was doing her presentation have already been taken forward by the Community Planning Partnership Board just at the start of this week. We know there's been a disproportionate effect on people living in poverty of a lot of the aspects of COVID, and the Community Planning Partnership Board have changed the emphasis of one of our priorities there to be poverty in the round and not just child poverty as it was previously, which I think is a good move. We've added in a fourth priority of health and wellbeing with a specific focus on mental health and also metabolic health, although we're trying to find a less scientific way of describing that. But as Mrs. Brown says, people have been struggling with many aspects of the last 7 months, and that's now going to be a focus for the board. And the one that's unfortunately been given a bit of a back seat, which was also highlighted in this report as an issue, was consumption of alcohol by people at home, because the working group working on the relationship of Aberdeenshire with alcohol is had to be pretty well parked, because it's all under the remit of the NHS, and not surprisingly they've been a bit busy over the last while. So there are not so many issues in terms of problems associated with licensed premises, because a lot of them were shut for a long time, but it's more about the drinking at home bit, which is the kind of unseen challenge, and that unfortunately is going to be not taken forward at the pace we might have hoped. So just thought I'd put that into the mix, as some of these things were mentioned in the presentation. But Provost, we've all lived through some very difficult and often challenging times these last 7 months. It's really interesting, I think, to see the effects of everything that we've just heard about laid out in terms of hard data. We've all seen the fantastic work that was done across our communities, and that is clearly reflected in these surveys. And it's and there's a generally very positive response to the many services that the council kept going, especially during the initial phases of the pandemic, and now into what we hope is a recovery phase. There's very much to learn from these results, and the results gathered must ensure that that we build on the really good work that was done during those troubled times. It's not all lost as we start to see things improve and move into something different. We also can see the differential impacts, and I think that multicoloured map towards the end of the presentation was very stark as to the differential impacts that this pandemic has had on our many and very varied communities across the whole of the area, and that's something we clearly have to take into account. And we have to build on the lessons learned from all of that, the good and the bad, especially as we flesh out our new service and area plans that will now follow from the council plan that we've just approved. So, and I think as Councillor Johnson said, we have to accept these surveys and the data collected from them, as Mrs. Brown said herself, are only a snapshot. And this exercise must be repeated, I think, possibly several times if we're really to gain the full benefit from the information, and then put that to good use as we develop our plans and going forward. We have to have some method of measuring success as we take all this information into some actions going forward. Because information is just that, Provost, as everyone knows only too well. It's just data, it's what you do with it that's the critical bit, and I think there's a responsibility for all of us, and Councillor Johnson again was dead right. We have a job to do in not only working with the information we have and putting it to good use, but then putting that message out as to what we can do and possibly more importantly what we can't do as things develop from here. And so I'll stop at that, Promise, by just saying again and commending Mrs. Brown on this thoroughly brilliant piece of work, and ask us to take our thanks back to everyone involved, and we look forward to seeing this developing over the weeks and months. So Promise, at that point I will just formally move the 5 recommendations on page 100 of the agenda, and I would seek a second at that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gifford. Do you have a seconder, please?
Yes, Provost, thank you. I will second that.
Do you wish to speak at the moment?
Yes, I do. I was just getting my video to work. So
right. No, that's no problem.
Just to give pleasure to everybody. Yes, thank you very much, Provost, and I'm very happy to second the leader on that. Clearly, I agree with everything that he said. And I think what comes out of this is just how deep and interesting and important an insight we get into how people are thinking and feeling across Aberdeenshire. It's been said by others, but it is a snapshot in time. We're facing a changing situation almost daily. The future is incredibly opaque and uncertain, and there's no doubt that we'll have to build on this initial work and almost in a kind of rolling program of assessment, and particularly seeking ways of involving vulnerable groups, and I think also actually doing more work to ensure that we get gender balance in the responses. I think additionally the outcome of all of this will be really important as we develop our service plans, area plans and community plans, and I'm particularly valuable, I think, when it comes to the infrastructure services service plan. There's some really very, very useful data in there that we will need to take into account. But I think what it shows to me, above everything else, is how serious a social and personal impact the COVID pandemic is having, and particularly the response to it, and the consequences of all of that to to mental health, I should say. And it really reinforces the need for genuine and not virtual human interaction. And I think that, to my mind, the clearest message that comes out of this is that while there is a place for digital, digital is not all, and is very far from being all. So on that note, Provost, I would just like to repeat the thanks that have been given, because I think they are well earned. So my sincere thanks to Elaine and her team. This is a really excellent and very deep piece of work, very profound. And I look forward to the work that will come to take this forward, but particularly thanks to Elaine and her team for the moment. Formally second, Provost, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gile. Yeah, I echo the sentiments that you both made. So, just one point with Councillor Gifford. Did I hear you say? Did you say the recommendation page 100? I think it's 110.
You could well be right, Provost.
Yeah.
Very bad typing.
Yeah, it's just for clarity, but that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Right. Councillor Mayor, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, and thank you to the officers for the report as presented today. Unfortunately, I was unable to be at my ward forum due to a prior commitment. On reading the document, I was concerned that whereas there was mention when discussing economic matters of oil and gas, agriculture and Brexit, none was made of the severely negative force this pandemic has caused to the fishing industry, from catching, processing and onwards, which is a very important part of the economy, with the largest whitefish and the largest shellfish ports both within our boundaries, and the markets and exports all but halted during the first few months of this crisis, and still not recovered to pre-COVID levels, and likely to be substantially impacted for some time to come. The effect of COVID has been identified as being most keenly felt in our North Coast communities, as per the graphic on page 167. Economic development have done a good piece of work on the industry and the huge difficulties caused to it by the pandemic, and we must ensure that we capture this within the CIA. The maximum benefit will be had by all those working on such activities, collaborating to produce the best advice to the Council going forward in how we might try to mitigate the worst effects of this virus from all angles. I have had correspondence with the authors of the report and with our fisheries officer, and they have assured me that this will now be included in a future redraft of the document. I thank them for that and will look forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mayor. Thank you. Councillor Petrie, please.
Thank you, Provost, and I'm going to keep my camera off if that's okay for a few minutes, trying to chuck me out of the meeting again.
No.
So the report before us contains a wealth of information, and it is as a whole interesting, worrying in places, but useful overall. It is a lot of information to take in, and I think the real benefit and focus to us as councillors will come when it's broken down to area and service levels. We do have some concerns through the partnership that the survey has missed out on reaching some of our important groups, and so I welcome the comments from Mr Johnston around work being done to reach those. Recommendation 2.3 acknowledges that COVID-19 does not affect all people or communities equally, and while that is evidenced in the findings, it is also apparent in those who did not take part in the survey. For those without internet access, they have been unable to complete the survey. While it's understandable that there are difficulties in finding other ways to engage those without digital access at this time, we must take the time to reconsider how we reach them before we undertake similar exercises again. This group may include some of our most vulnerable residents in some of our areas that stand to be the hardest hit by the pandemic, and it's vital that we find a way to reach out to them. Another group notable by their absence in the findings are our young people. While it's noted that parent councils were invited to take part in the ward forums, I think it's important that we also engage directly with young people. The difficulties we face right now will have a significant impact on the beginning of their adult lives. They are the future and their direct opinions matter. On page 146, there are some stark and concerning figures around the impact of COVID on mental health, and that's why I'm glad we agreed earlier to the inclusion of our support for positive mental health and wellbeing in the council plan, and through the community planning partnership earlier this week. This won't go away with the pandemic. There will be a lasting impact, and we need to work with communities to get through it. I think what we have before us is a great basis to move forward, but I would hope that the points I've raised can be considered and incorporated as we move to other exercises, which I think would be well worth taking forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Petrie. Councillor Calder, please.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for Elaine for the presentation. The Community Impact Assessment online survey, by its nature, doesn't include those most affected by the first wave of the COVID virus earlier this year, and particularly the poor, the elderly, and those living in areas of deprivation, many of whom have no internet access, as has been already mentioned. We have to find ways of engaging with these people who have no internet access. Otherwise, the figures are skewed, as we see. As a result, the findings of the CIA do not reflect the impact on the most disadvantaged in our communities. From a demographic analysis of the survey, as has been pointed out, only 18% were men, and that's got to be looked at as well. Only 6% had a long-term illness or disability, only 9% were in private rented accommodation, only 11% were retired, and only 15% earned below 20,000. That's particularly interesting here because in Peterhead, in central Peterhead, 47% of households earn less than £20,000, compared to 23.5% across Aberdeenshire. The unemployment rate since COVID is 10.8% in central Peterhead, but 3.8% across Aberdeenshire. So it's a huge variance there. The positive impacts listed in the report would not have been shared by those living in cramped accommodation and small flats, mostly private rented accommodation, with no outdoor garden space and no internet access. There would have been a negative impact on children of school age and their ability to engage in remote learning, thereby widening the attainment gap between rich and poor. The elderly, especially those who live alone with no IT access, I found to have been particularly badly affected by loneliness and even anxiety during a period of shielding and lockdown. I witnessed that personally myself in central Peterhead. In the space of about 3 weeks in April, 22 town residents here in central Peterhead died of COVID in 3 weeks in April, the highest number in North East Scotland. A large proportion of the residents in the area where I live are East European nationals. I see no evidence in the report that they were engaged with, they're not mentioned at all, to find out how they were affected specifically and what help could be provided. A large proportion of these residents don't have private transport, and with the public transport severely curtailed, many could not access supermarkets for vital provisions. As we seem to be entering a second wave of COVID, we have to ensure that the same communities are not sidelined and they don't again bear the brunt of the pandemic. All spheres of government, Westminster, Holyrood and local authority, need to do things differently in order to tackle the scourge of poverty, inequality and exclusion in our communities. Funding must be directed to addressing this, and the issue of targeted engagement with disadvantaged residents must be addressed as a necessary priority. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Calder. Thank you. Councillor Everson, please.
Thank you, Provost, and I too thank everyone who's involved in the production of the community impact assessment and that echo the comments that have been made about what has to happen as next steps. I think very significantly is moving forward, the voice of our children and young people needs to be heard more. We have a commitment to the Children's Charter and we need to make sure that's reflected in all our aspects of work and obviously the next step of the CIA as well. Of huge significance to me, and has already been stressed, is recommendation 2.3, that COVID-19 has not affected all people or all communities equally. And that must, of course, inform our service plans worked on from now going forwards, and will give added importance to the equality impact assessments, which are part of our scrutiny at committee. We must be ready to respond with a differentiated approach to develop the fairness and the equality we seek. I think, though, that the key to our work as a council moving forward is hidden away on pages 151 and 152 of our papers today. There it talks about the council being an analyser, an anchor, and an agent of change. Change that can support inclusive growth and tackle inequalities. The council leader, when he was speaking, said what is important is what we do with the data, and I think that's right. And I think those three words, those three aspects are really important to us now moving forward. The CIA, I think we all have a duty to make sure we use it to support us to become a key agent of change as we move forward through recovery and renewal, and take it forward in its different ways and make sure that every group is involved in that as well. So thanks everyone for the work involved in it and for their shared aspirations and values which have led us to this stage as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Everson. Councillor Pike, please.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to thank the officers who have been involved in this report. It's the most fulsome report, but I'm always conscious that we as a council and councillors, the amount of information we can absorb and the time spent trying to digest this information. I do think that this report could have been edited. There's far too much unnecessary information and opinion, such as comments around Brexit. Brexit is happening. So Aberdeenshire Council, please, we must accept it and don't rely too much on economists. No economist has ever been able to predict when financial markets are going to crash or commodity peaks and troughs. The trends of the financial world, Brexit will find its own equilibrium. This report, we should be now using this in a proactive way and bringing forward ideas and being much more reactive to what's going on around us. We've captured what's happened, but we need as a council to have vision, and with vision comes good leadership. If I concentrate on the vulnerability table, the last page of the report, this is very, very difficult to interpret, as there is no understanding as to how the weighting and the data was collected and collating. From this table, it would really suggest that we need to revisit the local development plan as to the areas we should be developing and promoting. Because quite clearly, this table, if I read it correctly, is telling us there is an imbalance of age, health and economic parameters, but not least transport infrastructure to reach out to the most vulnerable areas of Aberdeenshire, predominantly in the north. But my final comment, and I don't wish to offend anyone, Provost, but I'm really disappointed to hear the comments of the Chair of Infrastructure Services denying that digital technology and internet services are not topmost priorities of this council if we are to be a dynamic and leading public sector organisation. Thank you.
Councillor Pike, I mean, you've made some comments and I have no issue with that, but how do you want these to be taken forward? I mean, are you wanting to move an amendment, or are you making observations for consideration by officers in due course?
Thank you, Provost, for highlighting that. No, I don't wish to make an amendment. I don't think this is the correct time for making amendments. I think the purpose of the debate for full council today is really for members to express their opinions, and we need now to be setting the framework of how we go forward. And I do hope that obviously the good guidance of the Business Services Director, he'll be aware of what members are saying, and the idea of going forward, do we repeat this exercise at the end of the year or not? What benefits, what gains? That's something for officers to decide and bring back to us. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely clear, and officers will be taking cognizance of all the comments that have been made. So that's I just wanted clarity in taking that forward. So, Councillor Guile, do you wish to come to respond to this particular point, please?
Yes, Provost, I
yes,
do.
If you could, yes.
I will,
please.
thank you. And I genuinely appreciate you allowing me to come back, but I can't let Councillor Pike's comment go unchallenged. I did not say that digital technology was not important. The point I was making was that in relation to human and social interaction, the genuine physical side of that is really important. And I think what the pandemic has shown is that people are suffering from a lack of that. So whilst digital technology clearly has its place and is clearly important, it is not all, and that was the point I was trying to get across. But I'm sorry if Councillor Pike didn't understand that. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Pike, you're down for a question as well. I mean, I did ask for questions some time ago. Do you still have a question you wish to to make?
Yes, thank you for allowing me back, Provost. I was slightly slow in typing in queue for question when obviously the officer was presenting the report, but my question really was just to get a bit more understanding, because this vulnerability map and the table, there obviously is important information in there, but I'm not convinced it's been presented in the best possible way. And I'd really like the officer just to give us an explanation, say, the likes of Peterhead Harbour, how can we rank it so low? If 1 is the worst ranking and 59 is the best, and Peterhead Harbour in terms of economic only scores 2. I mean, that would suggest that Peterhead Harbour is on its knees and there is mass unemployment, but we don't see that. There needs to be some balance as to where this information has come from and how it's been presented. Thank you.
And are you seeking a response now?
Well, if that's possible, please.
Yes, right.
Because I think
Mrs. Brown, could you respond to that if possible?
I can respond by saying, can I come back later with a response, please? I don't have that level of detail here in front of me at the moment, but I accept what Councillor Pike is saying, that we need a little bit more detail. And as I said in the presentation, we have an enormous amount of data in behind, and some of those discussions need to take place again, either at ward or area level or in other forums. This was really an overview, but I'm happy to come back with some more detail on that at a future date.
That's absolutely acceptable, yeah. Councillor Pike, are you clear with that?
More than happy, Provost. I just think yes. This is where we need to tease this out. Thank you.
No, thank you for your question. Chief Executive, please.
Provost, thank you. Mrs. Brown has covered much as what I was going to say, but just to endorse the comments that officers will come back with some further advice following more conversation with councillors as we get into the detail that is presented here in terms of how we wish to repeat and expand and extend the work. And I think particularly as the conversation has reflected, the application of the data that's presented here as a first pass is going to be of fundamental importance. But more than happy to come back through to councillors to develop what that work plan would be to progress this further forward. Thank you, Provost.
I think that's a very helpful assurance, Chief Executive. Thank you very much. Councillor Owen, please.
Thank you. I'm just fixing my camera. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Owen.
Thank you. As has been said by previous speakers, the input of our young people is crucial. And Education and Children's Services held a really excellent Teams meeting with the MSYPs, seeking their views on the impact that the COVID pandemic has had on them and their peers. This was recorded and has been circulated, and I hope many of you have been taken the opportunity to listen to it, because it really was extremely an excellent thing to do. A further meeting will be held before Christmas, but can I just say to you that no one will be surprised to learn that the digital connectivity and equipment rated actually very highly as an issue with the young people. And I think we have endeavoured to try and ensure that all people who need equipment have got it, and even to the extent of ensuring that certain people in connectivity areas, the areas that of concern, have actually got dongles as well. Mental health obviously was another issue, but actually, until you actually listen to the whole thing, it will give you a completely good flavour of what happened. I'd also like to remind everyone that as the chairman of the Education and Children's Services Committee, I do send out agendas and seek the views of the MSYPs at every meeting. And if they have time to make comments, I do ensure that those comments are actually circulated and shared at committee. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Owen. Okay, I see no other indications. At this point, can we accept the recommendations as in item 4, page 110? Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Now, this is quite a handy break, because we're having to end the public session within a few seconds. So I can confirm that the public section of the meeting has now concluded, and thank you for your interest.